Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast with Dotun Adebayo and Tim Vickery.
Yeah, thanks for joining us for this Global Soccer Initiative part of the Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast. We're with you on a Wednesday and a Thursday. Thursday, we turn it over to you and have questions and conversations about football with you. The Legendino, as always, is in Rio. We urge you to subscribe to the channel and please join the Brazilian Shirt Name WhatsApp channel link in the description. It says under there. But hey, it's good that it says it under there, which means I don't slip up, particularly when it comes.
Yeah, I never know what it means. Link in the description. Never know. It's like linking. But what are these things?
Well, it's like PDF. What does it mean, Tim?
Yeah. No idea.
Do you know what I mean?
No idea.
Thank you. Well, this is by way of.
Please don't fucking ask. It's PDFA, I think.
This is by way of introducing our first guest for this Global Soccer Initiative Interactive. You see, you've got me stumbling over it now. Amos Murphy, football writer. Welcome to the podcast once again.
Pleasure as always, guys. How are we doing?
Yeah, very well. Tim's being mischievous. So tell me, what's the... And by the way, I should say that Amos is a sports writer for The Express, co-founder of the City Ramble podcast, crucially. Big stories, I suppose, is the way that the Premier League table is looking, not least at the top. We'll come to the bottom maybe a bit later, but at the very top, who would have thought Bournemouth would be up there? Who would have thought Sunderland, maybe the most amazing story of all? Which is the biggest story for you currently in the Premier League, mate?
Tottenham third, I think, if we're being brutally honest. I'm only kidding. I think you've got to look at, to be fair, I think both are equally impressive. The issues that newly promoted teams have had in the Premier League over the last definitely 2 seasons, but I'd say sort of post-COVID, since the money's really started to sort of stretch out from top to bottom. But Bournemouth as well, obviously, perennially, an EFL team over the last sort of 15 years or so have been promoted to the Premier League, established himself as a second stint this time around, came mightily close to getting European football last season, FA Cup quarter-final as well. They're looking imperious. You know, it was only really that Liverpool game on opening day that they've slipped up. So yeah, I think you've got to give equal measure to both, and a little sprinkling of Spurs as well, because the season they had last year, I know we say it in jest, but 17th to 3rd after 9 games is pretty decent itself. No, not gonna lie.
Words to your beautiful words to your ears, Tim. I know you'd be delighted at this. The table, though, is, I mean, we should have seen Bournemouth coming, because they've been, since Iraola went and took charge of that club, they've been able to beat virtually everybody that have come, in front of them in the Premier League. I'm not saying that they'd be European champions or anything like that, but I'm not sure there are many teams in the Premier League that he hasn't beaten at least once or given a real run for their money. We should have seen that coming, even though they're a small club. If you have the right coach in the right place, you're going to be up there or thereabouts, aren't you? Do you think this is a particularly extraordinary season for them or not?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, an overwhelming chunk of this is certainly the manager's brilliance, and I'm just hoping from a Bournemouth point of view that they get to see the season out for him, because it feels like if any of those big clubs, cough cough, Liverpool, continue to struggle, then he's kind of the first guy on that shortlist. But go back to the summer, I'm pretty sure they lost 3 out of the 4 starting defence. Milos Kerkez goes to Liverpool, Zabani goes to PSG, Dean Huijsen goes to Real Madrid. So they've done an amazing job of sort of recruiting, and then also stepping up a level as well, not even just maintaining that status quo that they were at. Young lad up front, he's scoring goals for fun as well now. I think he came in from Lorient. So yeah, the recruitment team has been really impressive. So maybe, perhaps, we should have seen it coming, but I think when you lose as many defensive starlets as they did, to sort of build on that, and 11 goals conceded after 9 games, it's great for Bournemouth, I think.
How is this possible? Bournemouth, Brentford, how is it possible? What are the mechanisms behind this? How can we explain that there are, one is an exception, but there's more than one, how are these clubs in maybe the most competitive league in the world? How are these clubs able to punch so highly above their weight?
I think it's a multifaceted discussion, because the elephant in the room is that it says the English Premier League, but it should probably say the English Super League, if we're being honest. I think a couple of guys have made this point already, but there's no point in speaking about the big five leagues in Europe anymore. It's the Premier League and a collection of other teams that have high revenues and can command, big Champions League salaries. The rest of the leagues just cannot compete. So, we've seen it ample times throughout the last few seasons. The likes of Bournemouth, Brentford, Brighton, teams like that have been going head to head with what you would consider European stalwarts, Marseille, Frankfurt, teams like that, and they've been beating them to transfers. So I think that, as much as we like to romanticize it, that is certainly part of the, problem, depending on which way you look at it. But I don't think you can underestimate having adults in the room. And, I'm always going to have a dig at Man United at any chance I can get. But you look at the way they've been run over the last 10 years, it has been a circus show. And to be fair to them, over the last month or so, it has looked like they maybe have turned a corner. But having people who understand football, there's a lot to be said about it. It sounds so simple, but obviously Bournemouth, Brentford especially, have modelled themselves on sort of data-driven methods, and I think that is certainly sort of it's showing. It's coming true now.
Yeah, it's funny that both Brentford and Bournemouth that we talk about both have strikers from round your way, Tim. I know it's a coincidence. It's not a huge, it's not the deal breaker or anything like that. These teams can do well without them. But Evan Nilsson, what a revelation! I mean, you're saying that no names mentioned. Liverpool might come in at some point. Who knows this season? Who knows? For Andoni Iraola, but I was surprised that Evan Nilsson was still with Bournemouth this season. I thought he would have been gone after he had quite a decent season last time around. They managed to keep their players. I mean, you mentioned the central defenders, or the defenders, going to Real Madrid, Liverpool, and what was it, PSG?
PSG, yeah.
That, these players are leaving Bournemouth to go to top clubs. Fair enough, you're going to Real Madrid, and as Trent Alexander-Arnold famously said, when Real Madrid come knocking, the whole house shakes. I get that, but they're not leaving Bournemouth to go to the likes of, arguably like Tottenham, or even teams that you would consider to be bigger, but maybe aren't doing so well, like Newcastle or whatever it might be. They're leaving for top clubs.
That makes recruitment much easier, doesn't it? Makes it much easier to recruit if you can say to them, look, if you do well here, look where you can go. But the art surely is in recruiting in the first place. And the Brazilian strikers that you mentioned, neither of them are big names in Brazil. Nowhere near it, unheard of, really. Evan Nilsson a little bit more, but the pool of potential players for the Premier League, given its Super League status, is global, isn't it? And so it seems to me that the ones who play that game better are the ones who are able to punch above their weight. Because first you can attract, you identify them, you buy them in, and when the team does well, then you can offer them, look, if you do well here, you can go from Bournemouth to Real Madrid,
in a season. And I think that's part of the crazy thing about it. It's something that I think a trend we've seen, not only in the Premier League but across European football. You don't need to hack it out for 5 years to get your big move. We're seeing players, some of them 6 months. There have been an example, Enzo Fernandez, for example, at Benfica. Yeah. If you impress, you're gonna get that move as soon as it might come around. So I think that is definitely part of what's going on here.
I think it's time to bring in our next guest, and stay with us, Amos. We've got Johnny Hawley with us from the Roker Reports to talk about what you might consider, Johnny, to be the most remarkable achievement of a team that's just been promoted, and what are they, fourth in the league at the moment? Did you see that coming? What we missed here?
I'd like to pretend that I gazed into my crystal ball and saw all of this coming, but no, not in my wildest dreams did I think we'd be sat here, as we're about to turn into November, seeing Sunderland in the Champions League places in the Premier League. It's just ridiculous. I mean, I think there was a lot of quiet confidence within the club and within a lot of the supporters going into the season in terms of, a lot of people obviously naturally were writing us off. Playoff winners, only got 76 points last season. Particularly a lot of Leeds and Burnley fans, well, you're starting on minus 24 points, lads. You've got to catch up to us first before anything else. I think, we all kind of recognise that wasn't necessarily going to be the case, what we've seen the last few years. But on the other hand, there's no way that you would have predicted we're turning up to Stamford Bridge and getting 3 points. Where, there's so many stats that have been flying around.
That was a good game, by the way. It was a good game. I can't argue with that. It was a good game.
Yeah, I think we were full credit for the result. But we're on a 3 or 4 match unbeaten run. In like sort of home and away, we're unbeaten at home. We've only dropped points in 1 home game so far, and these are stats that I think any team in the league would bite your hand off for at this point, except Bournemouth, Arsenal, and Tottenham. But the fact that we're in those kind of conversations, I think, tells you. But
Newcastle would bite your hands off for that, wouldn't they?
Don't get us started on them lot.
That must delight you no end. I remember one season, the TV commentator turned the camera to this young Mackham, Sunderland fan, and he said, I think when the last time you were promoted, he said, where do you think you'll come? And the kid said, I don't care where we come, as long as it's above Newcastle. I don't care if we come 19th, as long as Newcastle 20th. So that rivalry, they must be loving it now. Your fans must be.
Oh, yeah. It's the first time in at least 8 years, if not a bit longer, that we've had any sort of bragging rights of any description over Newcastle, particularly when you think about that ill-fated FA Cup tie a couple of years ago as well. So, yeah, that's just an extra layer of sweetness. And I think that their fans, you've seen them turn pretty quickly from, Sunderland, it's only Sunderland, they'll go down. Then it was, well, you've not played anybody yet. And now it's, well, just wait till Christmas and wait till the second half of the season. So
I'm glad you brought Christmas up, Johnny, because I'm going to ask Tim first, but obviously I'm going to come to Amos as well to shatter your dreams, because Tim, you're very good at this. Like you did it to Nottingham Forest fans last season. Very many times you said, look, enjoy it whilst it lasts. And then you proved to be true. So could you look at your crystal ball again and, be realistic with Johnny? How long can that last?
Well, if you'd have asked me 5 years ago about Brentford and Bournemouth, I would have got that one wildly wrong. A question for our friends. Is this a landmark season? In that, was last year the death knell of, if you like, the Russell Martin method? The side coming up and trying to reproduce the style that they'd had in the Championship and failing absolutely dismally. And is this the season of bulking up physically?
I think something that's worth mentioning, I've seen a lot of teams that have gone down from the Premier League, fans of teams that have gone down in the Premier League the last couple of years, and they're saying, why couldn't we have been in a league that had so much dross towards the bottom? And I don't think that's necessarily changed. I think genuinely, you look at the way Sunderland have approached this, and they've obviously done heavy investment, but one of the biggest success stories, bar obviously slipping towards the end of last season, has been Nottingham Forest, in the sense that when they came up for the first time in, 20 odd years, they threw everything at it to try and stay in the league. So I do think, Tim, you've got a point there, in the sense that it does feel like there are teams, I chuck Leeds in there as well, and to be fair, Burnley are doing okay, albeit not necessarily have invested as much, that they are looking to establish themselves, because the Premier League is volatile. I think that is fair to say at the moment. It feels like we're in a bit of a change in the guard in terms of not only stylistic sort of, the way that teams are playing, but also the teams that are competing. It feels like it's kind of waiting for that next era to emerge, and who are going to be the guys. So I do think there's sort of places to be fighting for, really.
Yeah, Johnny, how would you describe the difference between this season and the last time you came up? Which did you say was 8 years ago or something?
Yeah, so 16-17 was the season we went down, and it's been in the wilderness since then. I mean, obviously, it was a radically different, landscape, the Premier League, the last time we were here. Obviously, it was still, dominated by money, and the biggest spending teams were winning everything, as you would expect in any league. But I think, the style shifts that have kind of gone on over even just the past 18 to 24 months really seem to have been quite radical in the way that they've, they're just the speed as well. It feels like all of a sudden overnight this season, everyone's just got a long thrower. 15, 20 years ago, it was unheard of, or it was Rory Delap and it was one team. Even the last time we were in the Premier League, there was nowhere near this much of an emphasis on set pieces, physicality, and just pure direct, attacking football, which I think you certainly saw that in certain teams and certain managers. Our season previous to relegation, we had Sam Allardyce came in, and he implemented a really direct and very pragmatic style of football. So it's not like it was never present, but yeah, it does feel it's almost a double whammy in terms of the difference. There's that stylistic difference, like, we've just kind of all been talking about. And I think as well, the competitiveness of the middle rung of the division is leaps and bounds ahead of where it was when we were in the Premier League last. You just wouldn't see a team as good as Crystal Palace or as good as Bournemouth finishing 12th in the table, 8th in the table. Teams as good as that were winning the league or challenging for the league almost, depending on how far back you want to go. Whereas I think now there's so much more of an emphasis on the fact that it was always a platitude, there's no easy games in the Premier League. At times there have been. But this season in particular, there really are no easy games in this league. Like, Burnley can turn you over if you switch off. Obviously, we've been on a brilliant run. You mentioned Leeds. But even beyond that, like Crystal Palace were the shining example last season. Bloodied some big noses, won the FA Cup. Slight hiccup with which competition they went into in Europe, but obviously they're in a European competition, and they won the Community Shield at the start of this season again. So I think that just shows you that, there's almost been a sort of concertina in where the level of the lower teams has really crept up and caught up to where the bigger boys were. And I think that for me was just the overwhelming difference. Last time you just did not have that.
Do you know, if I could just suggest what I can see as a difference is, you see, Johnny just mentioned Sam Allardyce. Last time that they were in the Premier League, there were English managers managing teams, the unfancied teams, if you like, the newly promoted teams, or the teams that were going to struggle in the league. He gave that job to English managers. Now it seems like foreign managers have come in and sussed out, well, hang on, I could do a better job than that. We don't have to struggle. I can see what the problem is. I'll try and fix it. Because Sunderland, they've got this remarkable Frenchman who I'd never heard of. I don't know if you had when he came to Sunderland, Johnny.
No,
exactly.
Never.
But he knows what he's doing. And what impressed me with what he said the other day, he said, look, let's not get carried away. My ambition is to reach 40 points. I think it's about time somebody said that. It's about time a manager said, mate, you can go on as much as you like, but we've won nothing until we've won the right to be in this Premier League. And they haven't quite done that yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the sort of defining attributes of Lebris since he come in at the start of last season, in press conferences, interviews, anything to do with the media, he's the most level-headed and reserved manager I've ever seen. Like, we could have just won 10-0 or lost 10-0, just got relegated, just won the Champions League, and you would not be able to tell just by looking at him and just by hearing the tone of his voice. Like, everything is always on such an even keel that I think you need that with such a young team coming up to the Premier League for the first time.
What about, I'm confused here. What about the arse and reserve of you English and the warmth and passion of we French? all of my, there are no stable points left in the world. Everything's in flux.
Yeah, he's not going to be getting his surrender flag out anytime soon either.
But there are a couple of teams at the very bottom. I'm thinking particularly of West Ham, though, Amos, that even though they've got a celebrated manager, I know he's brought in at a time when they were like heading downwards without a parachute, but a celebrated foreign or an uncelebrated foreign manager isn't always the right answer, or is it? Are we seeing a period where English managers are going to struggle to find, once David Moyes has done his tenure, are going to struggle to find a team in the Premier League to give them that opportunity?
Should more of them be going abroad to make a name for themselves abroad?
Maybe, but that Russell Martin episode that you mentioned very briefly, Tim, I would say that damages the brand, English managers as much as anything else. Amos?
I should, to sort of answer the second question there, should English managers start going abroad? I don't know if the English coaching pool is as cultured for that. We speak about managers going abroad, and first of all, there's a language barrier, which famously English people and languages don't necessarily mix. Don't get me wrong, there are probably some that could bulk that trend and would be able to accomplish it, but just speaking generally, I do think we are necessary. Over the next 5 to 10 years, we could maybe see English managers struggle. Although,
do you think that was Russell Martin's problem in Scotland? Couldn't he understand a word you're talking about?
Yeah, Russell Martin had plenty of problems in So that could have been certainly one of them. But I think his issues were
That sounds like a perfect time to bring in our next guest. So I'll bid you adieu, Johnny. Thank you very much for joining us. And Roker Report. Where can people hear that?
Yeah, so we've got a podcast feed called How Are the Podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify. How Are the Podcast?
I thought it was the other lot that got to use How Are. You lot can use that as well.
Right, big point of order. How Are with 2 A's, Sunderland. How Are with an O and an A, that's the Geordies. You don't want to be caught dead using that one.
Thank you. Couldn't have done it without you. Couldn't have known that without you. So, Roker Report is where to find you online and otherwise. Yeah,
Roker Report, How Are the Podcast.
Yeah, let's
cheers,
do it again.
lads.
I've got a feeling that we'll talk about Sunderland again soon, so don't go too far.
I won't.
Meanwhile, thank you. Yeah, meanwhile, of course, the Russell Martin experience in Scotland. There's one person that I know will be able to give us the song and dance about that. Our very own friend Hugh MacDonald, famously of the Scottish.
Is it any wonder that Russell Martin didn't work out? We're not even in November yet, and Hugh's dressed for the Arctic. Was this the problem? Russell Martin just didn't assimilate, didn't want to learn the language.
That's right. I mean, it was too cold for his pet polar bear, apparently, and had to take it out. I mean, I'm sitting here for many reasons. This hat, one because it's Scotland, 2 because that London government that has taken my fuel allowance from me, and left me bereft, and 3, Happy Diego Day to all who celebrate and all should. So I'll take off my Boca 10 hat and reveal myself in all my glory.
I'll take mine
Today's
off.
the day when he would have qualified for his free bus pass.
Yes, he would have. God bless him. God bless Diego. Russell Martin. The simple thing that Russell Martin forgot to do in Glasgow was win. That was his. I mean, it's this stuff everybody goes on about. He talked in riddles and he did it. Losing managers tend to talk in riddles. Winning managers become are often, or they're a bit eccentric, or aren't they funny? So like Martin O'Neill's press conference before and after last night's game, and it's all fine because he won. It's really that simple in Glasgow. It's perhaps the most stark example of the importance of winning, because even in England you can have other teams winning. You can have Arsenal doing well and Liverpool pushing and Man City maybe a bit slumping and all that. In Glasgow it's Celtic or Rangers, and in Scotland generally it's Celtic or Rangers, but now of course this season we've got a bit of Hearts.
Yeah, Hearts and Midlothian, hey? How much,
Hugh, the Hearts story How much is, because Tony Bloom obviously seems to be intrinsic to this, how much is this the application of models that have worked well in Brighton and Brentford and Bournemouth being taken to Scotland?
There's a bit of it, no doubt about it. There's a bit of the particularly in. There's about 3 players I reckon already that they've brought in that have been really good by analytics by Casaridis, the left winger, Braga at 10, and the Brazilian who's only just come in and out the team. But you can see he's a player. Basically, at the moment, it's based on really sort of hard and true values. We've got Derek McInnes, who is almost the archetypal Scottish manager in that he manages his resources well. He's a bit dour, perhaps football-wise, a bit set in his ways. Plays 4-4-2. Doesn't, it's not death by football, passing all over. But he's been relatively successful given his resources. So there's that element that Hearts needed to, after a succession of dreadful appointments, they had to bring in somebody to steady the ship. My contention is if you were bringing in somebody to be analytic friendly, you wouldn't have brought in McInnes. But now that he's there, he's smart enough. He's by no means an idiot. He's smart and shrewd enough to say, well, I'll see how this can work for me. And so far, so good. But I think the analytics thing, Tim, to answer your question, is only the very, very start of the journey for Hearts. Really is, because the players that have been really good this season, the 2 centre-backs, Halkett and Finlay, and the wing-back Milne in particular, wouldn't be, I think, analytic buys. They're just guys that Derek McInnes knew and could do a job, but they're certainly bleeding other guys in.
Amos, this proves your theory, doesn't it? Because, by the way, Hugh, we've got Amos of the Daily Express here. Yeah. And a moment or two ago, Amos had a theory. Look, it's all about the Premier League. With no disrespect to our Scottish cousins or our Lithuanian cousins or our Spanish, French, German, Turkish, etc. No disrespect to all the other leagues. It's all about the Premier League. And I wonder, because the Hearts story for me is fascinating, not just the Hearts story, Amos, the Hearts history indeed, which is so intertwined with the British war effort in the First World War and all this sort of stuff. There's so much romance around this. It's barely a story. It's barely a story in the English landscape. I mean, a team, an unfancied team. Hearts have always been a great team, but as you said, we've been used to the dominance of Celtic or Rangers. When Rangers are in sort of like legal troubles, it's Celtic back to back to back to back to back. Looking, and suddenly Hearts are dominating, even beating Celtic. I mean, why is that not a story over here? It's such a story for me as a story of, the team in Sweden, which just won the league with 1,000 residents in its town,
Yeah, totally. I think, on a macro level, 2025 has kind of proved the year of the underdog with, you mentioned Mjällby, is that right, Dotun?
Yeah, Mjällby, that's exactly right.
Obviously, Go Ahead Eagles, I think they won the Dutch Cup. There's been all sorts of examples,
That's
so
right.
maybe there's something in the water. But I think the Hearts situation is fascinating, not only because you mentioned the sort of, I'd say, like, it's broken through a little bit. But the big talking points have obviously been Celtic and Rangers, and it does feel like there's been a kind of Armageddon situation going on in Scotland in that sense. And obviously Brendan Rodgers resigning, walking out, Russell Martin being hapless. I find the Hearts situation absolutely fascinating on a personal level, and I wouldn't mind asking the question, Hugh. Would Hearts winning the Scottish Premiership be the best thing to happen to Scottish football in 50 years? Because I see it as a situation where obviously there is an ethical and a moral conversation to be had about the likes of Tony Bloom and sort of how they operate on a football scale. But in the sporting landscape, if other clubs could see that it isn't just Celtic and Rangers, and don't get me wrong, I imagine it will, Celtic will probably win the league title this season, let's be honest. And over the next 5 years, maybe someone like a team like Hearts or whoever don't get close again. But if you can just have that sort of that little carrot being dangled, would it encourage, the likes of Aberdeen, Motherwell, Hibernian, etc.? Could it maybe influence their owners or other owners to come in and try and do something similar?
Yeah, I think it's actually ongoing. The process has started already. If you look, there's a lot of American owners in Scottish football, and they're not welded to the old idea of the manager's got all the power, we just give him the money and he goes out and buys players. And they're welded to the idea: how do we make a success of this? How do we make this not only cost effective, but how do we make it? How do we get our buck back? Really, because that's what it is. These American owners are not coming in because they want to star in some Highland fantasy, a sort of Brigadoon of the SPFL. They're coming in to say, right, we're putting in X money, how can we get X money back? And for years I've had conversations with executives at Celtic in particular, who were saying that okay, everybody was saying, Celtic with too much money, they've got this and that. But they're saying the principles of how we got the money can be used by other clubs. And one of the major principles was the Celtic player trading model, as they call it. In the old days, we used to just call it transfers. But the Celtic model was very strong. And while, Hibs or Hearts or Aberdeen couldn't quite get on that to the level Celtic did, the schools still could get on at a level. They still could get players, they could resource players and sell them on. And that's already been in process. I mean, Aberdeen did it a couple of years ago when they brought in Majowski in particular, who's now at Rangers, but they sold on to Girona for a decent fee. So they're slowly getting round to the idea that there is money to be made in Scottish football. The other thing names with Scottish football is it's extraordinarily popular. There's this stat that always gets thrown out that per capita, more Scots go to games than anywhere else in the world, certainly in Europe, per capita. So for Hearts, for example, I would say, Tony Bloom's taking a chance with Hearts, but even before Bloom came along, Hearts were selling out their stadium, 18,000 every week, with no realistic hope of winning a league. I mean, maybe getting a final, cup final, maybe fluking a cup final or just getting one. So the core is there. The actual infrastructure is there for people like Bloom. And it's just like, well, how do we flip it? And now if they flipped it into a Champions League place, for example, and they don't have to win the league to do that, finish second and then go through the qualifiers, it's like throwing the double six, I know. But if they did that, suddenly his investment he's getting 30, 40 million pounds for the Champions League, which in Scottish terms is absolutely mind-boggling.
So you kind of grew up, Hugh, on Celtic as being one of the greatest teams in the world. This is the first Northern European team to become champions of Europe, with an entire team basically from the shadows of the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Celtic, and maybe this applies to Rangers now, are they caught in a permanent trap where they're almost too big for Scotland and too small for Europe?
Yeah, absolutely. I always call them prisoners of geography. I don't think I've had all the years going down to England and doing games and that. I don't think a lot of English journalists, in no disrespect, so because why should they? They don't quite appreciate the size of the club until they come up and then you see it. And by the way, that's not restricted to journalists. Managers as well will go, I didn't realise how big a club this is. Celtic, for example, sells 60,000 season tickets, 10 to 15,000 on the waiting list, and that's for a game against, with all due respect, Livingston, or whatever, So imagine what they'd be like in the Premier League, for example. I mean, the discussion about the Premier League's bang on. Everybody keeps talking about there should be a European Super League. The big problem in European football at the moment, outside of England, is that there is a European Super League. It's just that no other clubs from outside England can join it. That's the problem. That's why, Barcelona and Real Madrid and PSG, Benfica, Ajax, and others are screaming because they see these huge revenue streams which they can't put their nose into that trough. So it's not just it's very particularly a Scottish problem. Don't get me wrong. It's because we are so small. I mean, I was reading the other day there, I think one of the relegated teams in England got 100 million from the television when they went down. Celtic would have to win, on current values, Celtic would have to win 33 consecutive titles to reach that 100 million.
It's
So
going
that's
to take him 35 years. And
But and thank you, because you've laid out the landscape very, very eloquently, I think, Amos. What the irony of what Hugh is saying here is that the two managers that have left Celtic and Rangers have been the story this season, and one of those managers, despite everything that Hugh has said, one of those managers, Brendan Rodgers, has never shied away from showing that he would rather be managing in the Premier League than in Scotland. I spoke to a Celtic fan just the other day, and they were so dismissive of Brendan Rodgers, it was painful. Because they said, look, let us forget about him. He's a past. He never liked us anyway. We haven't forgiven him for leaving us the first time. So it's going to be he's doing this rounds again for the second time. And it underlines your point once again, though, Amos, about the power of the Premier League. Can you see a development for either Celtic and Rangers in particular, which both Tim and Hugh have described as being too big in the pond that they swim in, or for Scottish football being given its potential, again, from what Hugh was saying about the support it gets, better than, let's face it, Celtic and Rangers get bigger audiences than some Premier League teams. Can you see Yanks coming in and making something of it, or is it just, do they have to accept in Scotland that you're the junior partner in these British Isles?
Yeah, it is. Obviously, Celtic have been the dominant force in Scottish football. I think Rangers' problems are a bit more deep-rooted than Celtic, because they are still winning league titles. And as I understand it, the frustration from Celtic's fans' point of view is the fact that they walk the league with barely any sort of challenge most years, and then they get to sort of European qualification phases. And, you could have a genuine conversation at why the Scottish champions don't automatically qualify for the Champions League main draw. But again, probably a discussion for another day. Like Hugh says, it does feel like they're stuck in this sort of purgatory of, being too big for Scotland, not necessarily big enough, or not necessarily being able to compete in England. I've got a proposition for the heads of the FA and the Scottish FA. I find the League Cup, and sorry, this may be blasphemy for some, but I find the League Cup in the modern era a little bit useless. You saw this week, Arne Slot chucked the game away against Crystal Palace. He wasn't interested in it. We've seen, my club, Manchester City, they won it 4 times in a row, and I'd say up until the semi-finals, a lot of the time they didn't need to lift a finger just because the squads were so big. Could you integrate Scottish football into the League Cup, and maybe that, first of all, brings more eyes onto the Scottish game, in terms of TV revenue, etc., etc. But it would also be a litmus test as to, where are Celtic and Rangers if they are competing against these Premier League teams? Because we see them in Europe, and it has been, at times good. Rangers reached the Europa League final in 2022. Celtic did, I thought, really well against in the Champions League last year, pushed by Munich to the very end in their knockout, in their playoff game. I would be intrigued to see how that would play out. Whether or not it'd be a good idea, I don't know. But I guess that's why we sit here on podcasts coming up with them.
I'm sure both of you gentlemen have got thoughts on this, Tim and Hugh.
Well, it's an interesting. I would fear for Scottish clubs against certain English Premier League clubs now. and it cuts my throat to say so because I'm of the era where, like Celtic v Leeds in 1970, Celtic went home and away under Martin O'Neill, who in a sort of incredible Back to the Future move has come back to Celtic as manager. In the run to Seville, beat a good Liverpool side handily, beat them 2-0 at Anfield. But the problem of the situation there was like in 1970, of course, you didn't have freedom of tenure. You could move. A player could move. He wasn't restricted by his registration in the club. So, for example, all the Lisbon Lions all played their best football at Celtic Park. This is unconscionable now because when Celtic played Liverpool in say 65 in the Cup Winners' Cup, 65-66, half that team would have been gone in the summer because players would just, it was like Monaco and Ajax recently and their exploits in the Champions League, just rip it out. So it's very, very difficult. I think football now more than ever, and I think we'd all agree in this, is money based. It's almost predictive by the size of the budget. Now you can mess up with the size of the budget. You can make a horrible mess of it, but by and large, the bigger the budget and the better the chance you've got, which is why you see the supremacy of the English Premier League, and why, frankly, the Champions League, if you've not got a team in it, is a bit of a bore, really. I mean, they all talk about, oh, that was great the other week, it was 4-2 this week and all this. But most football fans I know would sit and watch it and a nice thing and say, that was good. But it's not like the days we say, I wonder who will win the Champions League. I mean, are we really going to get a deep conversation that Benfica have got a chance, or maybe the Dutch will do well this year? I mean, it's down to very, very few clubs, and the clubs it's down to are English clubs, Barcelona, Real Madrid, PSG, with a slightest chance of Bayern Munich.
Bayern Munich.
What's the common denominator? Loads of money.
Wow. On that note, I mean, thank you for bringing the downer to this wonderful, joyful podcast. But it is real. This is, and I thought your idea was brilliant, by the way, Amos. So I'm not knocking that at all. But Hugh is much more pragmatic than us dreamers.
Scotland does that for you. The Scotsman voted in the universe. There's roles assigned for every nation. We know why Brazil's here, beaches, sun. Football loving. Every country has got its way. We're here to put the rest of the world on a downer.
But so what one of the things I most like about Scotland is when you come out of that little defensive bunker and decide you're the greatest wee nation that ever drew breath, and go around singing "Ole, ole, ole, ole," we're going to bring that World Cup back from over there, and it all goes horribly wrong. It's one of the most enjoyable things.
The other thing about it, which unfortunately has been lost in Scotland, but the other thing about it in those times is we actually believe that. People say, "Oh, that was good." I would just say that was good crack. That was good part. I was 23 in 1978, and I believed it. I believed we were going to bring that World Cup there from over there.
We had one on the World Football phone-in 2 weeks ago. Quite an old Scottish guy who thinks you're going to do it next year. He really does. So it's still there. It's still that hubris is still part of the DNA.
It's still there, and the thing about it as well is it's usually ignited by alcoholic intake as well. And now I've been sober for about 4 decades now. I can't even look to that for any solace. I'm just condemned to be realistic and pragmatic. I was wandering about in Germany for Euros. I was walking over the Germans Euros, and everybody's looking at me with great excitement. I just said, for German games, just looking at people. And as the game approached, they go from this is going to be hard You know, and then the alcoholic intake came up and said, "Yeah, you know, we've got a chance. We've 3 or 4 good players." You know, but tea time was coming. I'd take a draw. I think we get out here a draw. And then just before kick-off, I was doing this sort of like Vox Pop thing, you know, wandering about, old man wandering about with a microphone. We've got to kill this mob. This mob, we're just going to wipe the floor with them. And I'm just standing there going, what? And of course, it turned out the way I mean, it was 5-1 going on 141. I mean, it was just like, and then of course again we go through the cycle. The next morning, everybody wakes up depressed, phones the Samaritans. Then the off license opens, and then the same circle goes again. Look at these Swiss. This one's not a football country. All right, they'll do 1 or 2. Draw next. Hungary. Now they've got nothing to been at it for 70 years. 70 years in this wash and rinse and repeat.
And Hughie Mac, you were the only sober man at the party.
It was incredible, yeah. I was standing in
Designated driver, mate.
It's really interesting. I was standing in a park in Stuttgart for the final game, and it was like it was as if there's some neutron bomb or something that goes on that doesn't destroy the actual landscape, but destroys humans only, because it was like standing in a forest with felling trees going around about you. There's guys actually dropping at your feet, you know, just like the dust would come up. Oh, there's another one bitten. There's another one bites the dust, literally, as the game progressed. Carryouts were being brought in. The carryouts that were so big they had their own weather systems, Tim. You know, there was just huge carryouts, like some sort of brutalist architecture had been brought in as guys were scaling these. I'm not looking about this. And to be fair, probably medically and psychologically, it could only be watched with some kind of anesthesia, you know. Certainly some kind of tranquilizer to watch that, because we were absolutely honking, as we say in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
So, you see, from what you say, you can understand why Brendan Rodgers didn't want to hang about too long. What's the official take on that, though, Amos? In terms of journalists, what happened? Why did Brendan Rodgers and Celtic part ways? I mean, apart from results and everything, they chose him, and he seems to have walked rather than being sacked. What happened?
You go back to summer, they get knocked out of Champions League playoffs by Kairat Almaty, who, you know, a story of the season. What they've done is fantastic, but, you know, European pedigree only goes so far. But let's be blunt, Celtic shouldn't be losing to a team from Kazakhstan in a Champions League playoff. And I remember, I think Celtic had a pre-season tournament in Como against Ajax, and they got spanked, if we're being honest. And Brendan Rodgers came out afterwards and basically sort of tore the board to shreds. Said that what's going on this summer isn't good enough. I've got a Celtic pal who, you know, don't get me wrong, I love to goad a little bit, but he has been sort of pulling his hair out of what's left of it at the sort of the state of the club. And I think I found it difficult personally looking from the outside in, because I at first felt it was a bit like Celtic having their cake and eating it, in the sense that they walk the league title, you know, they do so well in that situation, like we said before, unchallenged. Although you can feel that frustration when you want to be making those next steps in Europe. And this is a daft comparison, obviously, because of the money that PSG have got behind them. But PSG are so comfortable in Ligue 1. But they are obviously making steps in Europe. I'm not for a second saying Celtic should be targeting winning the European Cup, but you can have that model where you dominate and domestically, and you can sort of build on that in terms of European aspects. Personally, I think like we said before, Hearts challenging and, in my eyes, fingers crossed, winning the Scottish Premiership would be massive, because it would sort of put the cat amongst the pigeons in that league. So, Brendan Rodgers going. I don't think it was a surprise. Maybe the way it happened was a surprise. Obviously, we're still 10. Well, at the time, I think it was 9 games into the season. But both old firm clubs, they've got messes to clean up. And you know, maybe it is a team like Hearts who sticks around until the very end and just about nicks it.
Yeah, what did you make of it? What did you make of Brendan Rodgers' exit, though, Hugh? He described the current Celtic team as comparative to a Honda Civic.
Yeah.
Nothing against Hondas, but I think he'd
Mm.
rather have a Ferrari.
Yep. The thing about him is there's so many layers to this, like all stories, isn't it? There's so many layers to it, especially when you're involved in it on a daily, day-to-day basis. But I think the strongest layer to it was the majority shareholder, sometimes called the owner, erroneously called the owner of Celtic, Dermot Desmond. He's a power there. He brought Brendan back to the club. He was Brendan's very strong supporter. But on a regular basis, Brendan was criticising the board on a regular basis. And I presume behind the scenes that he'd have been told at some point, listen, this isn't helpful, apart from anything else. And it was heading towards, he was going to get sacked. I mean, I think almost certainly he was going to get sacked. And possibly not in the back of the results. It was just that, it was that, who will rid me of this turbulent priest, and he got to that stage, especially, and if you're a billionaire like Dermot Desmond, you're not putting up with this. But then again, in any walk of life, if you publicly come out and criticise your colleagues, the people that are under you and your bosses, how long are you going to last? And this wasn't an isolated incident with Brendan. It was continuous. It was continuous, and obviously, usually after a defeat or a poor result. So I wrote a piece in the summer. I said they should sack him before the Champions League, and then they've got a clean break, and they can look at the Champions League, and the manager can come in and he can't complain about recruitment. He's taking the job. He knows what he's got and going, because they played for nigh on 4 hours, given extra time and added on time against Kairat, and could not score a goal. 4 hours. That's not on boardroom recruitment. I don't care what anybody says. That is not on recruitment.
But from what you've been saying, it sounds as if he was almost goading them to sack him. If you're criticising your boss like that, and can understand, like you say, your boss ain't going to take that, is he? But it sounds like he's goading them because he didn't have to make the public denouncements, did he? Was there an element of that? Also, where maybe it's a question for Amos. Where do you go after this? Because clearly a failure. But Hugh first.
Well, yeah, an element good, but I think it's just in Brendan's nature. I mean, if you look at every single club he's been at, since he became successful, not so much Swansea, but since he became top level, Liverpool, Celtic, Leicester, it comes a point where people in the boardroom say, no, you can't be saying that. It happened at Leicester, he was coming out, we haven't kicked on, we haven't this, we haven't that. It happened at Liverpool, where, now it's in the public domain with the book How to Win the Premier League by Ian Graham, that he wasn't, to put it politely, in sync with the sort of collegiate values of the club, shall we say. And it was always going to happen. At Celtic, you see, had basically ultimate power because he came in, Dermot Desmond's man, so he was given, as Dermot Desmond said, he stayed, he was given power of veto over signings and departures, effectively. That is not. You won't get power of veto at Liverpool over departures and signings. I don't know if even Enrique at PSG would be given that. Or even Pep at Man City, possibly Pep. I don't know. But it's a very unusual thing now. And to then have that and then criticise, there's only one way it's going. Absolutely. Where does he go next? I think Saudi Arabia. That's my view. I'd be interested in Amos because he, like everyone else, he'll know much more about this than me, but that applies to so many subjects.
Don't be silly. No, I think with the Brendan Rodgers experiment, I find an absolutely fascinating one because and look, I don't know the guy, and I don't necessarily want to project, but I feel like he feels as if he is maybe above his station a little bit in terms of what he's not only done with his career, but what he can do. And he had a fascinating spell at Liverpool in the early 2010s when Sturridge, Suarez, by the way, we know what he went on to do and what sort of brilliance he was capable of. Probably played a big part of it, but after that, it died a slow and not exactly slow death. It was over quite quickly, but it sort of. But he had the goodwill and like we say, obviously, first stint at Celtic, successful enough. Leicester, no, and there was genuinely talk at one point that he could be on Man City's radar as a Pep Guardiola replacement. And at the time, I was like, what on earth are we doing here? So I don't know. Saudi Arabia feels like possibly, the graveyard for managers who think they're above the station a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see him rock up there because I've never been enamoured with what he brings tactically or even sort of I don't think he's a very good statesman, like you say, Hugh. He tends to pick the petty arguments, and I think when you're not necessarily there's only a couple of managers that you can get away with doing that, and I don't think he's one of them at all.
It's very interesting, Dotun, that when Celtic, certainly in recent years, 13 out of 14 titles, a double last year, taking Bayern Munich almost to extra time and a knockout tie. And Celtic literally besieged at the moment. A scene from The Simpsons with Mo carrying the torch and then heading towards Celtic Park last night. Literally fans outside the stadium shouting and bawling and creating a breach of the peace against the board. Not a whimper in the ground or outside the ground about sacking a manager. Not a whimper. Well, sacking a manager, sorry, I must say a manager resigning. Not a whimper about that. That's not entered the discussion. They're not saying, this board have done this, done that, and that, and they've lost us Brendan Rodgers too. That hasn't come into it.
Tim, apologies. We've kept you from telling us all about the Copa Libertadores.
Yes.
Well, also, just quickly, what about the chances there of Ange coming back to?
I apologise.
Speaking of bad experiments, goodness.
Any chance?
No, I don't think so. Again, when we're talking about Brendan Rodgers, I think Ange would regard Celtic as a step back. I think he reckons there's another job for him. I don't think there's another job in EPL for him. I think he made an absolute disaster going for Force. I think leaving Tottenham, there was another job in him because people could say, all right, he had a lot of injuries and he did win a Europa League, but not in the first one, just dreadful. There's probably a job in the Bundesliga for him, maybe somewhere in Spain, but I don't think he's, I know he's not desperate to come back, because if he was desperate to come back, I'd be at his press conference at the moment, because Celtic would take him back right away. So if there was anybody who was interested, it'd be domino, it'd be done. But what I'm really most interested in is Quito. Tell me about that.
Oh, right, yeah. Copa Libertadores. We've got one finalist sorted out last night, and the other finalists will be sorted out tonight. And you see similar things that you're talking about with the Premier League being like the European Super League. Similar thing is happening in South America with Brazil. Brazil is South America's Super League. Brazil has won the last 6 versions of the Champions League over here, the Libertadores. 4 of those 6 have been all Brazilian finals, and we still have a chance of an all Brazilian final this year. Last night, Flamengo managed to squeeze past Racing of Argentina 1-0. They won the first leg 1-0 in the Maracanã. They held on for a 0-0 last night, despite having been a man down after 55. But you look at the Flamengo first team, the side they put out yesterday, 6 non-Brazilians, plus Jorginho, who is Brazilian, but his footballing nationality is Italian, the one who played for Chelsea. Yeah. And so they are cherry-picking talent from all over. They got the hero was the Argentine goalkeeper. They've got Uruguayans, very good Uruguayans. They've got Ecuador. They've got Colombia. And so financially, it's so hard to compete. Racing had a go, but really, it's a lovely word without a vowel. I think that the Welsh have hoil. You know that word?
Yeah.
It just means get up and get them, get up and get them. And Yeah, that's it. And that's all Racing had. And they tried hard, but with much more Hoyle than class. And they couldn't score, so they go out 1-0. The other semi-final later on tonight, Liga of Quito, LDU of Ecuador, against Palmeiras. Now, Palmeiras go into this. Palmeiras are a huge side. It's the Italian community of Sao Paulo. Very, very well run. And they've spent a lot of money. In financial terms, there is no comparison between it. There's no comparison. Liga of Quito don't stand the slightest chance. But they can defend well. I was in the stadium for the last goal they conceded. It was after 13 seconds of the first knockout game they played. It was against Botafogo. They conceded after 13 seconds. And they've gone all the rest of that game and the next 5 games in total, all against top Brazilian opposition without conceding a single goal. And they won the first leg 3-0. They have the advantage of altitude of Quito. Yeah. But it's not La Paz. It's not Bolivia. It's doable. The Palmeiras coach is Portuguese, Abel Ferreira. You're going to be hearing a lot about him because he's brilliant. There's a lot of the young Jose Mourinho about him, both in the way that he can set up his side and he can change games in the course of matches with substitutions, and in the fact that he's absolutely unbearable. And he's just a nightmare of the fourth referee. You know, he just spends his whole game moaning and whining, and he's unbearable. If he wasn't unbearable, he would be Brazil's coach now, I think. What stopped him getting it is just his behaviour is out of order. And this is a sentence I never thought I'd say. They lost last week 3-0 because he picked a ludicrously attacking side. He never does it. But the game before, the Sunday before the for the first leg of the semi-final, they played Flamengo. It was the big game. These two sides, they're fighting for the league title as well. And they lost 3-2. It was a good game, but they lost 3-2. So let's give a vote of confidence. Let's go out to attack. And he knows the conditions. You really shouldn't be doing that at altitude. He's got a front two anyway, for reasons that I won't go into now, but he's got a front two, which is quite rare these days. So he's got a front two. So that puts onus on the midfield. And he picked a midfield where no one marks. And he's right back who doesn't mark. And Liga just walked through him. It was 3-0 at half time. Liga could have scored many more. And Palmeiras couldn't get it back second half. But now they got 90 minutes in front of their own fans. And I still think they'll do it. I do. I think they'll be able to breach this one. Liga, and I've seen them a few times in the stadium this year. It is a remarkable story, but they haven't got a lot of pace. They haven't got a lot of counter-attack in them. And without a lot of counter-attack, I think Palmeiras should be, just like Ali McLeod said he was going to do against Iran in 1978, Hughie, they should be able to plant themselves in the Liga half and just turn the screw. So whatever happens tonight, it's a fantastic story, whatever happens, because either Palmeiras are able to overturn this, this huge first leg disadvantage, or Liga hang on. And, a club from Ecuador in the final of South America's Champions League, it hasn't happened since 16. And Ecuador is the country that punches above its weight more than anyone else in South America over the last 10 or 15 years. But it's going to be a long 90 minutes for them. They will try and transform the stadium into a giant waxworks museum. This is the expression that we use in Portuguese for time wasting. Wax, cera. There will be the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper is 38. He's a reserve goalkeeper. He's like a praying mantis. He was Ecuador's goalkeeper in the 2014 World Cup. He's a reserve goalkeeper, but the first choice got injured on the eve of the first. So he comes back at 38, and he has a fantastic game. He will spend hours and hours and hours rolling around on the floor. They will take hours over every set piece and every throw on. They will try and work the clock down. But I still think that even though they have this 3-0 lead, I think it's going to be a long, long 90 minutes for them.
Well, it's been a long 63 minutes for us on the podcast today. I would urge all of you to subscribe, please. If you've got a moment, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And do join us as well on the Brazilian Shirt Name WhatsApp group as well. Hugh, it's been amazing. Amos, what can we say? Let's do it all again. I think we're the Four Musketeers, yeah. And thanks for providing so much of the jokes for us, Hugh, because usually I have to write my own, but it's great to have you with us. Yeah, let's do it again. When shall we four meet again? That's some Scottish for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to be quickly with this full allowance thing.
He's gonna freeze away.
Yeah, of course. Anyway, thank you. Yeah, no more Macbeth quotes from you for today.
Get in touch with the Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast on Twitter at BrazilShirtPod, or you can email us BrazilianShirtNamePod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and tell a friend. The Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast is an 1129 production.